exhibit is in the Zoom room. And I just want to remind all of you out there, as well as here on campus, that exhibit, Stigma and Survival, closes today. We're going to hear about the exhibit and how that exhibit fits in with the artist's work in just a few minutes. But if you have an opportunity to come by the gallery today, please do so. So my name is Tess Jones. I'm the director of the Arts and Humanities and Healthcare program here at the Center for Bioethics and Humanities. I usually start this out by reminding everyone about events to come on November 19th, Friday at noon. And this is the 2021 lecture series, Enhancing Wellness for Healthcare Professionals Through Engagement with the Arts. The creators of the Colorado Resiliency Arts Lab will be presenting. We've been in collaboration with them. We've had a long series of artists and activists who have been working on this project. And so if you have a chance, please try to engage with that. This information's on our website. And let's see, our next Arts and Medicine is Monday, December 6th. We have a virtual presentation by Ash Luna. She's a photographer, writer, speaker, and parent. And she will be presenting on the Fourth Trimester Bodies Project. This project shares the beautiful, empowering, and sometimes difficult experiences that postpartum people go through, which is so interesting to call it the fourth trimester. So again, that's on Monday at noon here. And finally, if you haven't had a chance to walk through our foyer, the Eye-to-Eye Portraits of Pride, Strength, Beauty exhibit is here. It's on display through January 2022. And please take a moment to look at these incredible portraits. So our guest today, William Stoehr, is a Boulder, Colorado-based artist. On his website, he writes that in 1964, he was 16 years old and he wanted to be an artist. William de Kooning was his hero, but the Vietnam War was raging and he couldn't afford art school. He probably didn't know what he wanted to do anyway at that point in time. He found his way, I guess, into engineering. He became an engineer and ultimately president of National Geographic's mapping business. In 2004, he retired to become a full-time artist, and it took a few years to find his voice, or what he calls his, quote, soul's work. The essence of William's art is the exploration of fundamental issues of our time, and that includes violence, addiction, and stigma. And that also includes its victims, its witnesses, and its survivors. So please welcome our presenter today, artist William Stoehr.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to start this with a brief video. This is about 4 minutes in length, and it kind of shows you how I work. This was produced about a year ago by the Scripps News Service, and they sent it out to, I don't know, 100 to 200 TV stations where it was shown. And we'll let David tee it up.
An artist is mixing paint and neuroscience to end stigmas attached to addiction and encourage people to seek help.
Painting hat. So I do get paint in my hair. What hair?
William Stoehr is a world-renowned artist. This is his technique.
I'll kind of mix it around like this.
And these are his subjects: victims, witnesses, and survivors.
The drip that's created may be random or an accident, but what I do with it is not.
William's artwork has a purpose.
Somehow I had to cause people to not just respond, but to maybe take some action or to feel differently about a subject.
He wants to end the stigma that comes with addiction.
My exposure to it really was through my sister, and this is my sister here. This painting. And she overdosed. And she had been suffering with alcoholism and addiction, probably for 30 or more years. And she succumbed, and it was tragic.
His own life experience with the sister, who he calls Emma in his artwork, is what drives him to make a difference in this world.
I learned that it was very difficult, one, for our family to talk about this, but two, for my sister to seek help. And it was because of the stigma. In fact, one day she said she was evil. She's not evil. She had a disease.
Neuroscientist Nora Volkoff has been instrumental in demonstrating that drug addiction is a disease of the human brain. She's the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, which gave us these images.
People still think that people are doing this to themselves.
Dr. Volkoff uses imaging to understand the changes in the brain that addiction causes. She compares it to the way our bodies memorize a pleasurable response every time we eat or drink water. It motivates our bodies to continue doing those things without thinking about it because it's necessary for survival.
But drugs have the capacity to generate and stimulate artificially those same systems, creating this strong memory that leads you to want to take the drug the next time that you are in the same environment.
Dr. Volkoff and William are working alongside each other to change people's perceptions of those struggling with addiction. They say art communicates emotion and a way to see things differently. William uses specific methods in his artwork to make people connect.
It just grabs you as an emotion. I mean, these large faces.
William says neuroscience taught him that people react strongly to a face with prominent eyes, and the ambiguity in his paintings force people to fill in the blanks, allowing us to see ourselves in the paintings too.
They are not different from us. They feel like us and reach out to you to sort of feel that empathy, to generate an emotional reaction to them.
His art also connects with survivors of addiction and encourages them to seek help. His art is what led his sister to rehab.
I had tried everything. I was at wit's end and just trying to remain calm and tell her I loved her. And I went up to her door and I said, I'll paint you a portrait if you go into rehab. The door opened just a crack and she said yes.
When survivors look at his art, he says they can relate.
A woman looked at one of my pieces and she said that I knew exactly how she felt and that she wanted to die.
But even though they may seem dark and solemn at first glance, they also portray hope.
She looked at the very same piece the next morning and saw hope in the woman's eyes. And then she said, "You saved my life." Now, I don't want people to feel bad. I want them to respond, to understand they're not alone, and then to seek help.
I'm Elizabeth Ruiz reporting.
Yeah, I'll get them going. If you've got them queued up, though, I'll go through them. So I have a favorite art critic. He passed away a couple years ago. His name is Robert Hughes. And this is from Robert. What good is art? What does it do? Is what it does actually worth doing? If art can't tell us about the world we live in, then I don't believe there is much point in having it. Well, in '65, I was 17 and I wanted to be an artist. And for several reasons, you heard some of them from Tess, I did not. 40 years later, I quit the best job I ever had to become a full-time painter. I figured I was young enough to start a new career, and why not do what I wanted to do when I was 17? And at that stage in my life, I could afford to define success in my own way. Now, my style was evolving. It was evolving quickly, but I was not at that time building a very cohesive body of work. It took me a few years to recognize my mission and artistic direction, to find my voice. So I have a marked up copy. Am I showing up on the screen, folks? Okay, all right, so it's not showing here. Okay, I have a marked up copy of Lewis Carroll's Allison, Wonderland. Now, you all remember the caterpillar and the Cheshire Cat, right? You remember those two characters? But do you recall the first words out of their mouths upon meeting Alice? So let me set the stage. Alice is walking along. She comes upon a large caterpillar on a toadstool. He's smoking a hookah. He takes the hookah out of his mouth and languidly asks her, "Who are you? Who are you?" Later, she came upon the Cheshire Cat, and the cat's first words to her were, "Where do you want to go? Who are you and where do you want to go?" Having the answers to these two questions put me on the road to finding my artistic voice. That's my passion and my road to get there. But I'm not there yet. The most important question is, well, we'll get to that later, because now I'd like to take you on an adventure to explore my art, my mission, and the science behind it. So as an artist, lots of things influence me, and ideas just seem to come out of the blue. But I guess my art is most influenced by the ideas of the early Cubists and my interest in the visual brain. And it focuses on victims, witnesses, and survivors. So let me tell you why. My sister OD'd and died. Her daughter, my niece, found her lying on the floor with an empty bottle of pills and a bottle of vodka. Emma, my sister, used booze, pot, and meth in high school. After graduating, she left home and wasn't heard for over 6 months. No one knew where she was. No one knew what she was doing. No one knew if she was safe. And no one openly talked about it. One day, she simply called and asked for airfare to come home. When Emma had the first of her 2 failed back surgeries, prescription opioids invaded her life. And when the pain continued, what did the doctors do? They just prescribed more. Our trusted small-town family physician said her spinal afflictions were the result of her falling down when she was drunk, which she did. But he missed what the real cause was. He misdiagnosed the actual cause, and he couldn't see this beautiful woman behind the drunk and the addict. He couldn't get beyond the stereotype, the stigma. Emma called the same family doctor to ask him to help her get into rehab. She was ready. I was there. I listened as he said, "Oh, Emma, it's Sunday, and I just got home from church. Call me tomorrow." Emma ran to her room and slammed the door. To this doctor, she was simply someone who made bad choices, an embarrassment with 2 kids and an empty refrigerator. AA didn't work. The interventions failed. She was kicked out of her first residential treatment program. But on the 3rd day of a marathon heart-to-heart, as I talked and pleaded and cajoled, from out of the blue, I promised her that I would paint her portrait if she went back to rehab. And she agreed. And for 5 years, she seemed to be in recovery. It was wonderful to see her laugh, wonderful to see her smile, great to go fishing with her, to see her work in her garden. But then her beautiful husband died. Then more back surgeries, more pills. She relapsed, she died. That was 9 years ago last month. I began painting when my wife Mary Kay and I lived on the island of St. John in the Virgin Islands. My early work was smaller, very colorful. It was figurative. Tourists loved it. My technique was getting there, but my purpose was still a big question mark. It took a few years to recognize my mission, to find my purpose, in my voice. Well, actually, my voice found me. And Robert Hughes, the guy who I quoted in the beginning here, he was in the back of my head whispering, "What good is your art? What does it accomplish? Does it really matter?" Well, here was the third question I alluded to earlier. Boils down to two words: so what? So what? That's the most important question that every artist needs to ask. So what? Can I make a difference? Can you feel what she feels? Can empathy beget action? How can I keep painting colorful dancing women for the tourists when there are bodies on the floor? So I started to broadly explore victims, witnesses, and survivors of war, discrimination, violence, abuse, bigotry, addiction, and the list just went on. And viewers interpreted my work exactly how I wanted them to, and that was with their own subjective context related to their own experiences. But again, the voice resumed and returned. How can you honestly relate to all of these issues? Well, I can't. But I can relate to addiction, not as a victim, but as a witness. And I know about stigma. Families are embarrassed, communities judge, doctors are dismissive, and the addicts think they are not worthy, or worse yet, evil. Stigma is a barrier to prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and recovery. So stigma became the focus of my art. It was the place to start. Emma OD'd, but maybe to the millions affected, I could be part of the solution. For me, art should bear witness. For me, art and activism go together naturally. And for me, stigma was the place to start. So with alcohol and drug abuse, we all know it's never just one person that's impacted. And so the faces I now paint are the faces of all those affected, the victims, witnesses, and the survivors. The first step to alleviating stigma is helping people understand substance use disorders are a treatable medical condition and not a moral failing. It's not a character flaw. And it needs to start with normalizing the discussion so people start to talk about it, that they're comfortable with that discussion. So my sister OD'd, but maybe to the millions affected, I could be part of the solution. Stigma was the place to start. So, you know, many people have passionate reactions to my work. They share their stories, they write to me, they call me, they talk to me at my art openings. They say things like this: "Our biggest fear happened. We got the knock on the door. We didn't know that prescription medications were in the game. We had no clue until we got the call that he was dead." I can remember when I wanted to quit using and felt more alone than I had ever in my life. I washed down a bottle of pills with a fifth of Jack Daniels. When kids are sick, normally people help the family. When people have an addiction, no one brings a casserole. So these are actual quotes. So those affected, as well as their mothers, fathers, husbands, sisters, tell me of the suffering, the terror, the anger, the rage, the chaos, the shame, the guilt, depression, and helplessness. But then some also describe resilience, forgiveness, and love. Some say they intend to get help to take the first step, that first step maybe to start an intervention. Some thank me simply for recognizing them. I exist. I am seen. I'm acknowledged and heard. I am not alone. So I believe in the power of art to break down the stigma of addiction. And I'm motivated to take my art to the next level in this service. I want to understand how and why we react to my art and how I can maximize that effect. But lots of things influence me. Ideas just come out of the blue. But I guess my art is most influenced by the ideas of the early Cubists and my interest in the visual brain. I wasn't always a big fan of Cubism. I wasn't a big fan of the early Cubism. I had a hard time looking at a brown painting where I couldn't see the wine bottle in the guitar, but that was in the title. And so I struggled with that. Things changed with this painting. 10 years ago, I went to Madrid and witnessed Picasso's Guernica. And for my money, arguably the greatest painting of the last 100 years. Everything changed. It's more than 25 feet of Cubist theory. It engulfs you like a battlefield. It's chaotic. Bombs explode, and it exploded my brain. The flames seared my flesh. I could hear the people screaming for their lives. I was there. I cried. It was a reality beyond paint and canvas. And I'm driven to understand how Picasso did it. This was a reality that from that day forward became my goal, to elicit a reality that is more than a simple image. I want to provoke you into creating your own reality in your own mind. I want you to have new and different experiences over time, each time you create my portraits with your own mental image, narrative, and emotions. Can you feel what she feels? So I now had a goal and a purpose. I was in search of Picasso's greater reality, and my cause was addiction and stigma. I studied everything I could find out about the early Cubists. What were they thinking? What did they talk about themselves? Most of the early writings centered on multiple viewpoints, lack of perspective, and the fragmentation of forms. But as I dug deeper, I learned that it was their goal to cause you to experience a painting in a way that is more than simply observing an image, to evoke a greater reality, to make it real. They discussed how they could experience the fourth dimension, that's time, the passage of time with multiple views, memory cues, and the exclusion of techniques that freeze an image in time, like perspective and lighting. Today, scientists say that the Cubists were really onto something. I don't see a snapshot of you. I take in a puzzle of light, lines, and shapes, and I process them along with a wave of non-linear memory images and other cues, which I recognize as you. Our brains pull it together, figure out what it is, and then decide how we feel about it. Recognition, narrative, and response, maybe not in that order. I agree with them that to our common sense, perceiving change as time may be a way that we get a taste of this greater reality. So I try to introduce in my art change in expression, change in mood, change in color, change in shape, and more. Picasso said, I paint objects as I think them, not as I see them. And when it is finished, it still goes on changing according to the state of mind of whomever is looking at it. Picasso is telling me that I lose control of the painting the minute I quit work on it and it is seen, experienced, and interpreted by others. And that meaning is subjective and never fixed. Picasso knew that we see not with our eyes, but with our brains. He understood that we are captive to our own experience, perspective, and anxieties. They influence our perception of meaning, reality, and truth. So, I pursue this greater reality with visual effects that other artists have used and some new ones that I stumble upon, which, as it turns out, are of interest to science. We are attracted to faces, right? It's our nature. Look how babies respond to faces, how they mirror your smile when you look at them and smile. This is no accident. We're probably hardwired for this. We devote more brain power to studying the details of faces than to any other object. For little kids, faces are where it's at. This is important to them. It's as if we don't have bodies, just faces with arms and legs. Anyone want to venture a guess what this is? A friend of mine's granddaughter drew this. Come on now. It's a picture of her pregnant mother. Eye, eye contact tells us that we exist. We are drawn to eyes, so I exploit a shared gaze. When eyes lock, you are invited to engage. A shared gaze is more than just looking into someone else's eyes. It is communicating with that person or crawling behind their eyes and watching events unfold. And in the eyes, just by chance, I started using small amounts of discordant colors that are complementary or generally opposite on the color wheel and are of equal value or luminance. A neuroscientist asked me why I was using equal luminance complementary colors and how did I learn to do that? And this is also called discordant color. Well, I said, I put green in the eyes, and I just read where the artist Wolf Kahn said, when in doubt, put purple next to green. So I put in a little purple, maybe a little green next to the green, maybe a little blue. And I thought, well, while I'm at it, why not add red, the complement of green, and how about some orange? That's all in those eyes. People said they looked real. Real. Now, when did you see someone with orange, red, green, and purple eyes? And she said to me, it doesn't matter. The color didn't need to be accurate to seem alive. This simple discussion got me most interested in the visual brain and led to several meetings, talks, panels, and collaborations with other experts in the field. So here we have discordant color again. Equal value complementary colors throw our brains into a tizzy. Monet knew that. He knew how to use discordant color, but he probably didn't know that our cones capture line and color and rods capture value and shading. He didn't know that they responded at different speeds, have separate neural pathways, or are processed in different parts of the brain. He just knew that he could make red poppies in a green field sway in the breeze. So now that I have your attention, with seemingly real eyes, I can start to do other things with line shading and color. Vague and scribbled outlines, caricature, and unfinished sections become part of a recognizable whole as you complete the portrait your way. I give you some raw material along with some realistic cues, and you make the person real. You do a better job creating my painting with your own perfect mental image than I can. So I employ all kinds of visual devices like discordant color, caricature, abstraction, and I play with your rods and cones. I use iridescent paint that changes with lighting and view angle. I frequently paint multi-views or facial features just slightly out of alignment. So eyes, nose, lips, slightly out of alignment. Some seem to be on different facial planes, not fractured, just static, but changing. I sometimes paint slightly different expressions from one side of the face to the other. This frequently results in an ambiguous overall expression, or sometimes one that causes you to exclusively see one expression or the other at different times. So my faces are big. This is a 7-foot painting. Well, there's 7-foot paintings over here in the gallery as well. They're big, but they're somehow intimate. They change as you move close into the painting, and they change when you retreat. Up close, my paintings are an abstract mix of lines, dots, drips, and splatters, but from a distance change to almost photoreal. So this painting's in the other room. The thing is that you can't see the forest for the trees at the same time. You interpret the image differently depending on your viewing distance. You get two paintings for one. This is known as global versus local vision, and the artist Chuck Close is well known for this. So maybe based on these conflicting cues, you create the emotion based on how you feel at any given time. I'm most interested in something neuroscientists call higher level ambiguity. Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring is considered a perfect example of this. Vermeer has set the stage for you to complete the narrative, hasn't he? Is she inviting or frightened? Is she innocent, pure, or seductive? With a simple glance and a shared gaze, Vermeer created an ambiguity that results in mutually exclusive emotional responses that at any one time seem correct and real. And over time, it changes with each viewing. You are certain about how you feel about the painting one moment, then later you feel differently. So I look to cause changes in visual perception and your emotional response through my methods and style in order to create this higher level of ambiguity. Ambiguity creates a vacuum that you want to fill, and you will do a better job than I can creating and recreating the painting and narrative with your own perfect mental image and projected emotions. I know my paintings have emotional impact, but it's ironic that this is something that I can influence but not control. I no longer own the painting the moment it is experienced, completed, and interpreted by you. This is your reality, born of non-linear emotional experiences, traces of the past, and mental images triggered by the cues I present. It is a reality which hopefully goes beyond simply observing an image. In other words, can I entice you to not simply interpret my paintings as illusions of reality, but instead cause you to perceive and experience a reality of your own making? I've been painting big faces since 2008, and I plan to continue because I haven't gotten it right yet. I must always be looking to improve because good enough seldom is. I'm constantly in search of the perfect painting while understanding that this is something that I will never find. So this brings me to art in a time of COVID, reinventing myself. Our son and his wife had their hands full with 2 jobs, a 2nd grader, online school, and a newborn. We decided that we would much rather be with our family and help where we could, so we packed up and moved to Washington, D.C. temporarily. We now split our time between Boulder and D.C. I decided not to set up a studio in D.C. during COVID. Because of COVID-19, I had 4 shows postponed, and the missed opportunities, cancellations, and delays kept mounting up, and given my mission, I considered this to be the worst possible time. So it's time to reinvent myself. I went digital on my iPad and computer, and I decided to leave my comfort zone of paint on canvas. Okay, so I can't experiment with paint drips, but I can still experiment with layers of color. I miss throwing paint and making large sweeping strokes with my large brushes, but I also recognize that much of my painting is done with small brushes as I place tiny dots, little micro dots, lines, and other marks across the surface of the canvas. I love the scale of the 7-foot paintings that are in the other room, but now I can project them billboard size, some as large as 40 feet. I love the way my paintings hang together on a gallery wall, but now I can animate them and create a never-ending, always changing virtual exhibition on social media and other online platforms. I love experimenting and learning new ways to handle paint. But now I'm learning and experimenting with iMovie, Photoshop, and GarageBand. But most of all, COVID showed me that reinventing myself is a way to take my art to a new level and to move effectively and more effectively get my message out to those that matter most, the victims, the witnesses, and the survivors. Now I can reach more people with multiple media at multiple concurrent exhibits at different cities because I can now send digital files rather than ship 7-foot paintings. I like my art to have an intellectual or philosophical foundation. I have fun experimenting with my methods, and today this is all about technology. But in the end, it is the emotional impact that I am most concerned with. The painting I showed you a little earlier is a digital painting. So today I'm combining traditional paint on canvas with digital technology. These are repurposed, high-resolution images of my own large-scale, unfinished paintings, in-process work, and original digital drawings. I continue to work on them on my iPad, where I add a full range of enhancements, which may include marks, masks, graphic overlays, animation, and sound to the base image, which I then reproduce as an individual image like this, as a GIF or a video. So I'm preparing these for high definition displays on TV monitors, as online presentations, or as projections as large as 40 feet or more. And I'm also producing high quality images printed on metallic paper, which I bond to aluminum composite panels. Throughout all of this, of course, is my quest for a greater reality, hopefully a greater reality, that unquestionable presence and actuality of your making that exceeds mere paint and illusion. Something causes you to experience this in a way that goes beyond simply observing an image. I keep saying that to myself, saying that to myself, saying that to myself. How do I get there? And then through all of this, I've got to believe that art can cause you to maybe discover that you are not alone, that you can help, that you can empathize, and take action. I want to start conversations to cause people to relate, respond, and take action before it is too late. I want to inspire others to carry the torch, to be part of the solution, to help erase the stigma. As with AIDS, I believe finding the answer to stigma in addiction starts with and will take a groundswell from artists, poets, playwrights, writers, teachers, scientists, doctors, elected officials, and you. And it is happening. My sister Emma said that she was evil. I don't know where that came from. Oh my. No, you're not evil. No, you're not alone. Yes, we can discuss this. Yes, we can get help. Yes, there is hope. And in the end, I must hope and believe that the future can be different than the present. And this is why I paint. Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions. And afterwards, if any of you would like to go through the exhibit with me, I'm happy to do that as well. So anyone have a question or a comment? Anything come up out in Zoom land? Not yet? Okay, all right. So the digital work is what keeps me going right now, and I'm really not only having fun with it, and it took me a little while to get used to the smaller scale, but now I'm looking at, okay, so I'm working on an iPad. So I've got an iPad Pro, it's 12-inch screen. I'm used to working on a 7-foot canvas, but I've now found, and I'm researching how I can use these digital whiteboards that they're using in the classrooms. You familiar with those? And now they've got them that don't involve a projector, but you can get one that's 6 feet and you can paint on it. And I'm thinking of how can I paint on that and combine that with what I'm already doing so that I can have that sense of painting like I like to paint, and then repurpose that image as a projection of some kind. Yes.
Okay, so we do have a comment and also a question from our Zoom participants.
Sure.
So first, the comment, someone says that was very moving and beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your work and personal experiences. And then a question is, did your family ever get to the point of being able to openly discuss your sister's addiction?
Not until she died. So before I started talking about this and using this theme in my art, I talked to my dad at length about just my sister running away and why no one contacted her or tried to contact her. And, he said, well, um, if we'd see one of her friends, we'd ask them if they had heard from her. And that was the extent of it because they were embarrassed. And he's less embarrassed now and more willing to talk about it. But at the time, everyone was angry and perplexed and thought, well, why don't you just stop? And not really understanding the problem. And, you know, I don't know if that would have saved her life, but it might have. And particularly with the self stigma that the person who's an alcoholic and an addict has, where they feel they're not worthy, that they've done something really bad, and they don't understand that they couldn't help it. And, with that, then maybe you're more willing to get help. Have any of you been watching Dope Sick on TV? Anyone here watch that? It's on Hulu. And it's one of the many programs that are coming out now that are dealing with opioid addiction. And Dope Sick stars Michael Keaton. He's going to win all kinds of awards for his portrayal of a southeastern Virginia coal country doctor who himself becomes addicted, but also his patients that he's been prescribing the drugs to. It's really powerful. But that's one of the things that is coming about. Do any of you know the group, the Luminaires, the rock group? Luminaire's last album was all about alcoholism and addiction. I'm sure it didn't go up to #1 on the charts, but they had guts to produce something like that. There's more books out about this. There's more things showing up on the PBS Evening News. So there's this groundswell that I mentioned earlier of people starting to talk about it so that it normalizes the discussion. And that's what my art is about. And that's what this is about. Anyone else? If anyone would like to stick around in the art exhibit, I'll walk over there. And if any of you want to come over there, be my guest. And if not, this was fun.
Well, I want to thank you, William, not only for today's presentation, but for the opportunity to live with your work for the last several months in our gallery. I think it has started conversations on our campus. I know I've had many students in and out of there, and I think that it has moved them and it has made a difference. And you and I shared with you the first time I met. I have a similar story with a sister who fortunately did not die after two near fatal experiences. And it is that stigma. It is that fear and embarrassment and shame of a family that just feeds the lack of self-worth and that depression and anxiety and sadness that's all bound up with substance use disorder. And I think some members of our family have grappled with it, some have not. But this notion of intervening with love and compassion and acceptance, I think is so powerful and so important for family members because I think that that first response is to hide it away and to be ashamed. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Great. Thank you all.